Hello there. This amazing story sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie. If you had already heard about this story before, we have some new information. It is about a very curious and intelligent young kid. About impersonation. It has secrecy. Banned experiments. Radioactive materials. The Boy Scouts. The FBI. The Department of Energy. The U.S. Navy. Substance abuse. And death. That's right, I'm talking about none other than the radioactive Boy Scout, David Hahn. At the age of 10, David got a book from his grandfather. The book was called The Golden Book of Chemistry Experiments. He had no idea that this specific gift would have a significant impact on his life. He was infatuated with experiments and even set up a lab in his room. He purchased Bunsen burners, chemicals, beakers, and more chemistry textbooks with his own money. His experiments were more than you would expect from a child his age. He was not doing your classic baking soda and vinegar volcano experiments. By the age of 12, David had made nitroglycerin all on his own. He was all or nothing with his experiments. Simple and safe experiments would never be enough for him. David was a driven Boy Scout. To become an Eagle Scout, he had to choose a few badges to pursue. One of the ones he chose was the Atomic Energy Badge, something that no other Eagle Scout in the history of the troop had pursued. David was a curious teenager who loved science and was fascinated with nuclear energy. He was so mesmerized by it that he decided to build a nuclear reactor in his backyard. Yep, you heard that right, a nuclear reactor in his backyard. Posing as a physics teacher, David was able to gain loads of information on where he could acquire radioactive materials. He learned that he could get americium from smoke alarms, thorium from old lanterns, and radium from old luminous clocks. To get the americium, David called a smoke alarm company and told them he needed a lot of smoke alarms for a school project. The company agreed without hesitation to sell him 100 broken smoke detectors for $1 each. He also stole many more smoke detectors from his local Boy Scout camp. David removed the pieces of americium from the smoke detectors and welded them all together with a blowtorch. He put this welded mass into a lead tube and covered it in aluminum foil. This was his crude attempt at making a neutron gun, a device that can irradiate many different elements. To get uranium, he phoned a Czechoslovakian company that sold radioactive uranium ores, posing as a college professor. They didn't question his credentials and mailed him the uranium. He also created uranium-233 by using his neutron gun on thorium, which he collected from old camping lanterns. David wasn't satisfied with the power of his first neutron gun, and wanted to upgrade it by adding radium, which he knew he could find in old clock dials. David put a Geiger counter on his car dashboard, and drove by antique stores until he got a high reading. Sure enough, he found a clock in the store with radium-painted dials. After years of building and irradiating materials passed, at age 17, he was ready to build a breeder reactor. He took all his old radioactive americium, uranium ash, thorium ash, and radium to create a makeshift core of the reactor. He surrounded this with a lot of aluminum foil and duct tape. David then waited and monitored his breeder reactor, which quickly became more and more irradiated. David started wearing a makeshift lead poncho when he was in the potting shed. Now, you can imagine, this kind of experiment is not exactly safe or legal. In fact, David's neighbors started to notice strange smells and smoke coming from his backyard. So they called the cops, reporting that he was stealing tires. This led to David's makeshift reactor being discovered. When the EPA showed up, they found that David had indeed created a small-scale nuclear reactor. And, unfortunately, he had also exposed himself to dangerous levels of radiation in the process. He was taken to the hospital for treatment. Make no mistake, David's experiment was incredibly dangerous and illegal. So, while we can admire his scientific curiosity, we should also remember the importance of safety. The story doesn't end there. David fell into a deep depression. The community chastised him for putting them at risk. He was almost kicked out of the Eagle Scouts. Without his lab, he became more depressed. He had also been rocked by a breakup and the suicide of his mother shortly after the reactor scandal. He enrolled in community college, but he stopped showing up to classes and eventually flunked out. David chose to join the Navy, still studying scientific topics in his free time. Interestingly, he was stationed aboard a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. Since he had already exceeded the lifetime exposure limit for thorium, he was forbidden from working with the reactors in any way. After 6 years with the Navy, David was discharged for health reasons and returned to Michigan. Shortly after, he was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. The FBI received a tip that David was trying to build another reactor and had a neutron source in his freezer. The FBI interviewed him over the phone, and he insisted that he was not building anything dangerous. Another anonymous tip came in from a friend who said that David's mental health was struggling, and that he was frequently using cocaine. The informant also expressed concern that he was building another reactor. An investigation began after this tip came in. In 2007, David was arrested for stealing smoke detectors from his apartment building. He had been found out once again. He was taking americium and welding it together into blocks. David went to court and was sentenced to 90 days in jail. He received medical care in the psychiatric ward during his stay. In his mugshot, David has sores all over his face. These are either caused by radiation poisoning, psoriasis, or drug use. On September 27, 2016, at the age of 39, David Hahn was found dead in his home. He had accidentally overdosed on a combination of alcohol, fentanyl, and diphenhydramine according to the autopsy report. It also detailed a history of alcohol abuse and some radiation-related injuries. He was buried in his hometown of Royal Oak, Michigan. And that concludes the story of the radioactive Boy Scout. It's a cautionary tale that reminds us that while science can be fascinating and exciting, we should prioritize safety and responsibility. I hope you found that interesting, and I'll catch you next time.